The small music hall smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long golden stripes across the floor. Chairs were arranged neatly in rows, and a few people had already begun to settle in. Most were older, carrying the air of experience and authority. Some whispered quietly, glancing at the grand piano in the center of the stage, its black surface gleaming under the light. It looked imposing, almost like a throne waiting for someone powerful to claim it. She walked in quietly, barely noticed at first. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and her clothes were simple, not drawing attention. She carried nothing with her except a small sheet of music, folded and worn at the edges. There was a faint nervousness in her steps, but it was underlined by a quiet determination. She had been here before in her mind countless times, imagining every note, every pause, every look at the keys. But the real moment was different. The room felt larger than she had imagined, and the expectant eyes of strangers weighed on her shoulders. She approached the piano slowly, her hands brushing against the polished wood as she settled onto the bench. The audience's chatter softened as they noticed her presence. There was an almost invisible shift in the air, a quiet anticipation. People were curious, but no one expected much. She was just another novice, perhaps trying her luck at a small recital, and everyone assumed they had already seen the best the evening had to offer. She placed the sheet of music on the stand. It was a simple tune, one that anyone could recognize, and she knew that playing it would not impress anyone. But that was the point. She wanted to start small, to ease herself into the moment. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs and calm the fluttering in her stomach. The room fell quiet, as if waiting for her first note to break the stillness. When she pressed the first key, the sound was soft, almost hesitant. It was not grand or showy. It was honest. A few people in the audience nodded politely, encouraging her silently, but most looked around, unconcerned. They expected a short, simple performance, perhaps a few mistakes, maybe a sweet but forgettable tune. But something about the way she held herself, the way her fingers moved, suggested there was more beneath the surface. The first few bars passed without incident. She kept her focus on the music, not on the audience or the small sense of doubt creeping into her mind. Her fingers found the keys with growing confidence, each movement more assured than the last. The tune she had chosen was easy, but she treated it with care, as if every note mattered, which it did. In the quiet hall, her playing was not just sound. It was a presence, gentle but unmistakable. A few people began to lean forward slightly, noticing the subtle precision in her fingers, the gentle curves of her melody. There was no rush, no desperate need to impress. Every note was deliberate, carrying a quiet strength. She allowed herself to feel the music, to let it guide her hands rather than force them. It was a dance she had practiced alone countless times, and now, for the first time, she shared it with the world. As the tune progressed, a change began to occur. The simple notes started to feel richer, layered with a depth that was unexpected. The audience's polite nods and quiet murmurs turned into intrigued glances. People leaned in unconsciously, drawn by something they could not yet name. It was not just skill, it was emotion, a story that was unfolding before their eyes. The small, timid woman at the piano was creating a space that seemed larger than the hall itself, filled with something pure and compelling. She glanced down at the sheet music for a brief moment, but she did not need it. The tune was embedded in her mind, and her hands began to explore beyond its simple structure. A soft chord here, a gentle variation there. Nothing extreme, nothing flashy, just a natural progression that seemed to belong exactly where it was. Her heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with a quiet excitement. She realized she was not just playing the music, she was living it. The audience could sense it, though they could not yet understand it. Some exchanged glances, a flicker of surprise in their eyes. No one had expected such careful attention to detail, such emotional depth from someone so apparently inexperienced. The quiet music that had started the performance was slowly transforming into something more complex, more resonant. The room felt different somehow, warmer, more alive, as if the notes themselves were inviting everyone in to share the moment. Her mind was focused entirely on the piano. She was not thinking about the applause, the judgment, or the reputation of the hall. She was thinking only of the sound, the movement, the feeling of her fingers on the keys and the vibration that traveled through her arms and into her chest. She allowed herself a small smile, a secret acknowledgement of the joy she felt. This was why she had learned, why she had practiced in silence for years. This moment was hers, and it was perfect slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The audience began to respond. A quiet breath here, a small nod there, the faintest trace of a smile on someone's lips. People who had been skeptical or indifferent were now leaning forward, listening with new attention. She had not done anything dramatic, had not played a virtuosic piece or performed a daring trick, but her sincerity and subtle skill were capturing them in a way that no one expected. The room was still, except for the soft music and the occasional rustle of a shifting chair. She felt a wave of confidence rising within her, a steady flame that grew brighter with every note. The simple tune she had chosen became a canvas for her expression. She experimented with the timing, letting some notes linger longer, while others moved more quickly, creating a delicate tension that was almost imperceptible. She noticed the audience holding their breath without realizing it, drawn into the rhythm she had created. Each sound was purposeful, each pause meaningful. The music spoke for her, telling a story she had never put into words. Minutes passed like moments, and she played with a quiet intensity that left no space for distraction. The hall had transformed from a place of polite expectation into a space of shared attention, a collective witness to something unexpected. People were no longer thinking about the performer as a novice. They were thinking only about the music and the emotion that came with it. She could feel the energy of the room, the subtle shift in the atmosphere, and it gave her strength. For the first time in a public setting, she felt completely at home. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the music and the connection it created. She allowed herself to sink deeper into the moment, trusting her instincts, her training, and the quiet voice inside that had guided her all these years. The simple tune had opened a door, and she was stepping through it fully, revealing a talent that no one, including herself, had ever displayed so openly. As the piece drew to a close, she slowed her pace, letting the final notes resonate and hang in the air. The sound faded, leaving a silence that felt thick, almost tangible. The audience sat still, absorbing what they had just witnessed. The music had been soft and humble, yet there was a clarity and precision in every movement that could not be ignored. For a few moments, the world felt paused, caught between the last note and the inevitable applause. And then, slowly, the room began to respond. A single clap started, quiet and hesitant, followed by another, and then a ripple that grew steadily into warm, genuine applause. People stood, some with wide eyes, some smiling broadly, all united in surprise and admiration. They had come expecting a small, forgettable performance, and instead, they had witnessed something quietly extraordinary. She stood, bowed slightly, her own cheeks warm with a mixture of relief and happiness. It was the first time anyone had seen the true depth of her gift, and the moment was perfect in its simplicity. She stepped away from the piano, not with a sense of accomplishment, but with a quiet satisfaction. The music had spoken, and for the first time, she felt it was heard. In that small, sunlit hall, a seed had been planted, not of fame or recognition, but of possibility. The possibility that a hidden talent, nurtured patiently and carefully, could reveal itself in ways no one expected. The applause settled, leaving a gentle hum in the room, a quiet energy that seemed to linger in the corners. She lowered her hands from the keys, taking a moment to let the sound fade fully into the air. But she did not step away from the piano. There was something unfinished in her mind, a spark that had been kindled and was now eager to grow. The audience, still recovering from the unexpected beauty of her first piece, leaned forward unconsciously, curious about what would come next. No one knew what to expect, but everyone felt the subtle change in the atmosphere. Her fingers hovered above the keys again, hesitant at first, as if testing the air. She began with the same familiar tune, simple and unassuming, letting it flow with the same gentle precision. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to add new elements. A soft chord here, a gentle trill there, a variation that made the melody sing in a different way. The audience noticed, some tilting their heads, some leaning forward, their eyes widening slightly. The music was familiar, yet it had grown richer, more complex, as if it were stretching its wings for the first time. She allowed herself to smile quietly, sensing the curiosity in the room. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a conversation between her and the piano, between her and the people who had come to watch. Each movement of her hands seemed to carry intention, each pause a moment for the audience to breathe and feel. She could sense the growing attention, the shift from polite interest to genuine fascination. But she did not let it distract her. Her focus remained on the keys, on the sounds she was creating. On the story that was unfolding under her fingers, the melody began to transform further. She explored its edges, stretching it, adding small, unexpected pauses, gentle variations in rhythm that gave the piece a new depth. Her fingers moved with confidence, but not with haste, each note deliberate, each chord carefully placed. The audience felt the change before they understood it. There was a subtle magic in the music, an unfolding surprise that was soft yet undeniable. People who had been skeptical at first now sat rigid with attention, caught off guard by the unexpected skill and feeling. A soft murmur passed through the hall, almost unnoticed at first, as one person leaned toward another and whispered. The words did not need to be loud. The effect was already spreading. Her playing was no longer just a performance. It was a revelation. The gentle tune that had begun as something simple and forgettable had transformed into a living, breathing story. There was no rush, no attempt to impress. Every sound, every movement, felt authentic, and that authenticity held the audience in a delicate grip. She allowed herself to take a deep breath, letting it anchor her. She began to add subtle dynamics, letting the softer notes carry a fragile sweetness and the louder chords a quiet strength. There was a rhythm to it, a flow that seemed natural, inevitable. The audience responded unconsciously, leaning forward, shifting in their seats, drawn by the pulse of the music. They could not take their eyes off her hands, moving deftly over the keys. But the effect went deeper than mere observation. It was emotional, visceral, an experience that stirred feelings without words. With every measure, she explored further. A small improvisation here, a delicate flourish there. Nothing overwhelming, nothing flashy, just a careful expansion of what had begun. The simple tune was now a canvas for expression, a medium through which she communicated thoughts and feelings she had never spoken aloud. Her eyes closed briefly, not in arrogance but in focus, and she let the music guide her hands. The hall seemed to shrink around her, leaving only the piano, the sound, and the audience who were becoming part of the unfolding story. She noticed small reactions, subtle shifts in posture, faint smiles, eyes glistening with recognition of something they could not explain. Her playing was no longer just a skill. It was a presence, a force that pulled the room toward her. Even those who had arrived with high expectations and skepticism felt the undeniable impact of what was happening. It was soft, yet it carried a quiet intensity that demanded attention. Every note was intentional, every pause a breath that added tension and release. Time seemed to stretch. The initial tune, familiar and simple, had become a journey. It was as if the music had a mind of its own, a story that was waiting to be told, and she was simply its vessel. She did not think about how long she had been playing. She did not think about the audience's judgment or expectations. She thought only of the sound, of the feeling of her fingers on the keys, of the resonance that traveled through her arms and chest. In that focus, there was freedom, a liberation that allowed her to explore and express without constraint. A subtle tension built in the music. She experimented with tempo, speeding certain sections just slightly, lingering longer on others. The audience responded instinctively, caught in the rhythm, feeling it without consciously understanding why. The hall seemed to breathe with her, a shared experience of anticipation and release. She could sense the wonder, the surprise, the rising admiration in the room, but she did not let it control her. She guided the music, allowing it to flow naturally, following the quiet voice within that had led her through years of private practice and careful preparation. She added a delicate chord progression that lifted the melody into new emotional territory. It was not sudden or jarring. It felt inevitable, as if the tune had always been meant to expand in this way. The audience felt it immediately. People shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, all absorbing the subtle beauty and complexity of what they were hearing. They could sense the depth of skill and emotion, the quiet genius behind the hands that moved so effortlessly. Whispers of surprise began to circulate silently, a collective recognition of the unexpected talent before them. Her own heart raced slightly, not with fear but with exhilaration. The music was alive, and she was alive within it. She explored the high notes with gentle precision, then returned to the low keys, creating a balance that felt natural and satisfying. She allowed herself a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the joy she felt in this moment, in the connection she was forming with the audience through the language of sound. Each note was a bridge, each chord a conversation, and the hall was listening intently. The melody continued to evolve, becoming richer and more intricate with every measure. She added subtle harmonies that enhanced the original tune, creating a sense of movement and tension. The audience, initially expecting simplicity, now found themselves captivated, their attention fully absorbed. Even those who had been skeptical or indifferent were drawn in, unable to look away, unable to dismiss the quiet brilliance unfolding before them. The music spoke where words could not, and everyone in the room felt its power. She played with a calm intensity, her focus absolute. There was no need for dramatic gestures or flashy displays. The beauty lay in the subtlety, the careful shaping of the music, the way each note flowed into the next. She was not performing for approval. She was sharing a part of herself, a truth that had been nurtured in solitude and was now revealed. The audience responded instinctively, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, all feeling the quiet genius that had been hidden for so long. As the piece progressed, the music took on a life of its own. It was no longer just a tune, but a narrative, an emotional journey that spoke of patience, dedication, and the hidden depth within a seemingly ordinary person. The audience felt it, though they could not name it. They were witnesses to the transformation of something simple into something extraordinary, and they sensed that they were part of a rare moment. The room was alive with attention, with emotion, with a shared experience that was subtle yet profound. Finally, as she approached the conclusion, she slowed the pace, letting the notes linger, stretching them just enough to leave a sense of space, a gentle echo in the hall. The final chords were soft, resonant, filled with the careful precision that had marked every measure. The audience sat in silence, caught between the last note and the inevitable response. They had been drawn in, carried along by something unexpected and beautiful, and now they were suspended in the quiet aftermath of what had just unfolded. When the final note faded completely, a brief pause hung in the air. Then, slowly, applause began. It started quietly, one hand clapping, then another, until it grew into a warm, enthusiastic recognition. People stood, some with eyes wide in astonishment, others with tears glistening, all united in admiration. The quiet, unassuming performer had revealed a talent that no one had expected, and the audience was captivated by the revelation. She rose from the bench, bowing slightly, her face glowing with a mixture of relief, joy, and quiet pride. The moment was hers, a triumph of subtle genius and heartfelt expression, and everyone in the room knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. The room was silent, yet it hummed with the energy of anticipation. Every ear was tuned to the soft, steady movement of her fingers across the keys. She did not rush. She let the music breathe, allowing each note to float naturally, lingering just long enough to touch the hearts of those listening. There was a calm intensity in her posture, a quiet control that made the piano seem alive under her hands. Each chord she played was precise, yet it carried a softness that spoke of vulnerability, of emotion hidden beneath years of careful practice. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing herself to feel the music rather than just play it. The tune had grown far beyond the simple melody she had begun with. It had become a journey, a story that unfolded with every measure. Her fingers moved effortlessly, translating thoughts and feelings into sound. The audience was captivated, caught between surprise and admiration, unable to look away. They sensed a depth they had not anticipated, a quiet genius emerging in real time before their eyes. The music shifted subtly. She added layers, delicate harmonies that enriched the melody without overpowering it. The simple tune that had begun the performance was now a living, breathing composition, filled with nuance and emotional weight. People leaned forward in their seats, some with their eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Every note seemed to carry a message, a fragment of a story that words could never fully capture. They could feel her presence, her soul poured into the keys, and it was impossible to ignore. She moved through the piece with a rhythm that was almost conversational, letting each section flow naturally into the next. A soft trill here, a gentle pause there, a slight change in tempo. It was subtle, but it created tension and release that drew the audience deeper into the experience. They were no longer observers. They were participants, sharing in the unfolding narrative that seemed to speak directly to each person individually. The room itself felt alive, attuned to the nuances of her playing. Her hands danced over the keys with a fluid grace that was mesmerizing. She was not thinking about the audience, about applause, or about recognition. She was thinking only about the sound, the emotion behind it, and the story she wanted to tell through her fingers. Every note was intentional, every chord a carefully chosen word in an unspoken dialogue. The simple tune had transformed into something extraordinary, something that demanded attention not through grandeur but through authenticity and depth. She allowed the melody to rise, a gentle crescendo that hinted at something greater, something emotional that was about to unfold. The audience felt it too. A subtle wave of anticipation passed through the room. The music carried tension now, an emotional pull that left hearts beating a little faster. People held their breath unconsciously, drawn in by the unexpected power of her performance. They had come expecting a simple recital, and instead, they were witnessing a revelation of skill, emotion, and humanity. The melody dipped again, softer this time, almost a whisper, as if she were confiding a secret to the room. There was a fragility in the notes that touched the audience in a way nothing else could. Some shifted in their seats, moved by a feeling they could not name. Others closed their eyes, letting the music fill their minds and hearts entirely. It was not a dramatic display of technical ability, but a quiet, steady command of emotion that held everyone's attention effortlessly. Her fingers moved with a combination of precision and freedom. Each measure was meticulously shaped, yet it flowed as if guided by instinct. The simple tune now carried layers of meaning: joy, sorrow, hope, and resilience all intertwined within the notes. The audience felt the story without needing words, as if the piano spoke directly to their hearts. They were drawn in completely, forgetting the world outside the music hall. Caught in the intimacy of the moment, she allowed herself a brief glance at the audience. Their faces reflected awe, surprise, and a deep emotional connection. Some sat still, eyes wide, unable to blink, while others leaned forward, absorbed entirely in what they were hearing. There was no pretense in their reactions. The response was genuine, raw, and human, and that gave her strength. The music was no longer just her own expression, it had become a shared experience, a bond between performer and listener that transcended words. She shifted subtly, letting the melody stretch, elongating certain notes to create a sense of space and reflection. The audience responded instinctively, feeling the ebb and flow of the music as if it mirrored their own emotions. She experimented with rhythm and dynamics, introducing small variations that added depth and tension. Each change felt natural, inevitable, as though the tune had been waiting to evolve in exactly this way. And with every evolution, the audience was pulled deeper into the story she was telling. The music began to swell with emotion, a gentle crescendo that did not overwhelm but demanded attention. Her fingers moved faster now, yet each note was clear and deliberate, each chord resonant and full. The audience could feel the intensity building, a wave of feeling that rose steadily and carried them along. There was a subtle tension that made every note more poignant, every pause more meaningful. The hall was silent except for the piano, but the silence itself seemed alive, responding to every movement and sound. A few tears glistened in the eyes of some audience members. They could not articulate why, but the music had touched something deep inside them, something that resonated with a universal human experience. She continued to play, unaware of individual reactions, focused entirely on the music. The story was unfolding naturally, and the emotion was authentic, flowing from her to the piano and outward into the room. The melody reached its peak, a harmonious blend of complexity and simplicity. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, letting it guide her hands without conscious thought. There was a freedom in this surrender, a purity in letting the music lead rather than following a rigid plan. The audience could sense it, and they responded with a quiet intensity that was almost tangible. Every sound, every pause, every subtle variation carried weight and meaning. As she moved toward the final section, she softened the dynamics, bringing the music to a gentle, reflective close. The crescendo that had built the emotional intensity was now a gentle taper, a release of all the tension and anticipation that had been carefully cultivated. The audience felt the subtle resolution, a quiet satisfaction that left hearts full and minds engaged. It was a conclusion, but not a finale, an ending that felt natural and earned, the kind of ending that lingers long after the last note fades. The final chord resonated and hung in the air, a gentle echo that seemed to linger in the hearts of everyone present. She allowed it to fade completely before lifting her hands from the keys, not in a dramatic flourish but with quiet acknowledgement. The room remained still for a moment, suspended in the aftermath of what they had just experienced. Then, almost instinctively, applause began to rise. It started slowly, one hand clapping, then another, growing steadily into a warm, sustained ovation. People rose to their feet, some smiling, some with eyes glistening, all united in admiration and astonishment. They had witnessed something rare and extraordinary, something that transcended the expectations of a simple recital. She stood, bowing slightly, her cheeks warm, her heart full, but there was no arrogance, No pretense, only the quiet joy of having shared a piece of herself, and having it received so profoundly. In that moment, the small, timid performer revealed a depth of emotion and skill that left the audience in awe, their lives subtly touched by the unexpected beauty she had created. The applause gradually faded, leaving a room buzzing with astonishment. People were still standing, some leaning forward, some holding their breath as if afraid to disturb the lingering magic. No one could speak at first. Words felt inadequate to capture the quiet wonder that filled the hall. She had risen from the piano, hands clasped lightly in front of her, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of humility and quiet pride. There was a calm in her demeanor, a softness that made the extraordinary feat feel effortless. Though everyone knew it had been anything but, whispers began to ripple through the audience, low voices exchanging surprise and admiration. Some were music critics, others seasoned performers, and yet all were caught off guard by what they had just witnessed. A simple tune had been transformed into a journey, a display of hidden brilliance that none had expected. There was an unspoken understanding among them that they had witnessed a rare moment, a revelation that was both personal and universally touching. She looked around the hall, noticing faces that reflected every shade of emotion: astonishment, admiration, even awe. Her music had reached beyond technique or training. It had touched something human, something deeply personal, yet shared among all who listened. A few audience members whispered to each other, exchanging glances that said more than words could. "How did she do that?" One murmured. "It felt like she was speaking directly to us," said another. There was a quiet consensus. They had underestimated her, and she had surpassed every expectation. Some people moved closer to the stage, eager to speak, to ask questions, to understand the person behind the performance. They were not just interested in the notes she had played, but in the depth of emotion and understanding that had infused every measure. She accepted their attention gracefully, nodding and smiling politely, not flaunting her talent, but acknowledging their admiration with warmth. Her humility was as striking as her skill, creating a rare combination of genius and gentleness that resonated with everyone present. The room slowly calmed, and a few journalists stepped forward, cameras and notebooks ready. They asked questions carefully, trying not to break the fragile, almost sacred atmosphere that had developed. "How long have you been playing?" one asked. She responded softly, recounting years of practice in private, in quiet rooms where the piano had been her companion. She spoke of countless hours spent learning, experimenting, and refining her understanding of music. There was no boast in her voice, only honesty and the simple love of expression that had guided her hands all these years. Critics who had arrived expecting mediocrity found themselves scribbling notes frantically, trying to capture the subtle genius they had just witnessed. Each phrase, each chord progression, each delicate variation became a subject of fascination. They discussed her understanding of rhythm, her ability to convey emotion without relying on flashy techniques, her precision and yet fluidity in every measure. Her performance was dissected and analyzed, but no analysis could diminish the impact of the immediate, human experience she had created. She had revealed something raw, something alive, and that could not be reduced to mere technicalities outside the hall. Word began to spread quickly. Conversations in cafes, streets, and social circles carried stories of the unassuming performer who had captivated an audience with a simple tune that had turned extraordinary. Social media buzzed with anecdotes, though few words could fully capture the essence of her skill and emotion. People spoke of the calm confidence, the quiet intensity, and the unexpected depth that radiated from someone who had appeared so ordinary at first glance. Each retelling carried a sense of wonder, a shared awe that grew with every recounting. Back in the hall, she was approached by fellow musicians who had never seen anything quite like it. They offered congratulations, expressed admiration, and sought advice. She accepted their words with quiet grace, acknowledging their recognition but never allowing it to overshadow the music itself. She spoke modestly, explaining that she had simply followed her instincts, trusted her practice, and allowed herself to feel the music rather than control it. Her explanation was simple, yet profound. It was not talent alone, but understanding, patience, and love that had created what they had just heard. The audience, both in the hall and those who would soon hear about it, realized that what they had witnessed was rare. A hidden talent, nurtured quietly for years, had emerged in a moment of pure authenticity. It was a reminder that genius could exist anywhere, often unnoticed, and that true mastery could be understated, humble, and deeply moving. No one had expected it, yet it felt inevitable in retrospect. as if the music had always been waiting for this moment, and she had been the one to release it. She lingered at the piano for a few moments, letting the silence absorb her final presence. The air was thick with the residue of her music, a warmth that made people reluctant to leave. Some sat in thoughtful stillness, reflecting on what they had experienced. Others spoke quietly, trying to make sense of the emotions they had felt. It was not simply admiration for a technical skill. It was the recognition of someone's heart and soul revealed through art. It was an emotional truth that connected everyone in the room, a shared acknowledgement of something extraordinary. As people gradually left their seats, the room retained a quiet energy, a feeling that something significant had occurred. Her performance had shifted perspectives, challenged assumptions, and awakened an appreciation for subtle genius. Even those who had arrived indifferent or skeptical carried a sense of wonder. As they stepped out into the wider world, they knew they had witnessed more than a recital. They had glimpsed a rare and unguarded brilliance that would remain with them. Long after the applause faded, she finally rose from the stage, stepping back with a calm grace. Her eyes met those of the audience members, and in that silent exchange, there was acknowledgement and connection. They had seen her skill, felt her emotion, and recognized her courage. It was a human moment, intimate and profound, a bridge between performer and listener that transcended simple entertainment. She had shared a part of herself, and it had been received fully, with genuine admiration and wonder. As she left the hall, she carried a quiet satisfaction, not from fame or recognition, but from the knowledge that her music had touched others. It had created a shared experience, a fleeting yet meaningful connection that left everyone present feeling something they could not entirely define. She walked away humbly, knowing that her journey was ongoing, that her music would continue to grow, and that the impact of this revelation would ripple outward, unseen but felt, in ways both immediate and lasting. Life began to shift in ways she had never imagined. Invitations arrived from music halls she had only ever dreamed of performing in, and messages from fellow musicians who admired her skill and wanted to collaborate. People who had once overlooked her now sought her out, eager to witness and share in her music. Yet she remained quiet and humble, carrying herself with the same calm grace that had captivated the audience the first time. She revealed her talent. She did not let the sudden attention overwhelm her. Instead, she focused on the music, on the joy of expression, and on the moments of connection that each performance could create. She traveled to different cities, performing in halls with audiences of varying sizes. Every space was different, but the magic was the same. When she sat at a piano, the room seemed to transform. Her fingers moved with the same gentle precision and emotional depth that had first caught attention, and audiences everywhere were drawn in, often surprised by the quiet brilliance that emerged from someone who appeared so unassuming. Each performance was a new opportunity to share her story through sound, and she treated it with respect and care, never rushing, never forcing the music, always letting it breathe and flow naturally. Her reputation grew steadily, not because of flashy displays or grandiose gestures, but because of authenticity. People spoke of her ability to make the piano speak, to convey emotion so profoundly that even those who had never listened to classical music before felt moved. Critics described her performances as transformative, yet she remained grounded. She remembered the quiet rooms where she had practiced alone, the small moments of joy and frustration, and the patience it had taken to reach this point. Her journey had been long, and she honored every step by keeping her approach sincere and human. With each concert, she noticed something remarkable. The music did not just touch the audience. It created a bond, a subtle connection between hearts and minds. She saw people leaning into the melodies, closing their eyes, feeling the emotion she poured into every note. Some would later speak of tears, of goosebumps, of moments of quiet revelation. They did not care about technical skill alone. They cared about the story, the honesty, the emotion. And that was exactly what she aimed to give, not attention, not fame, but a shared human experience that lingered long after the last note faded. She began to collaborate with other musicians, not seeking fame, but exploring new dimensions of expression. The partnerships brought fresh challenges and opportunities, and she embraced them with humility and curiosity. Each collaboration added new layers to her understanding of music, allowing her to experiment with different sounds, instruments, and interpretations. She remained true to her core approach, listening, feeling, and letting the music guide her hands. The audience responded with the same awe and warmth she had first experienced in that small hall, drawn to the depth of honesty that permeated every performance. Despite the growing recognition, She maintained a routine that kept her connected to the essence of her gift. She spent time in quiet practice rooms, sometimes playing the same simple tunes she had begun with, letting herself explore without pressure or expectation. These private sessions reminded her why she had started, why she had loved the piano long before anyone noticed. She played for herself, for the joy of discovery, and for the connection that only music could create. In these moments, she found peace, grounding, and the reminder that fame and attention were secondary to the music itself. People began to see her as a source of inspiration, not just for her skill, but for her humility and dedication. Young musicians sought her guidance, curious how someone could convey so much emotion with such grace. She offered advice gently, focusing on listening, patience, and authenticity. She encouraged others to find their own voice rather than imitate, to explore the depth of feeling behind every note, and to respect the quiet power of simplicity. Her influence grew quietly, shaping not just performances, but the way people approached music with care and honesty. She also found that her journey brought opportunities for reflection and growth outside the music itself. Each performance was a lesson in human connection, in patience, and in understanding the subtle power of expression. She noticed how small gestures, slight changes in timing, or a soft touch on a key could elicit strong emotional responses. It was a reminder that influence and impact did not always come from grand gestures. Sometimes, the quiet, sincere effort had the deepest reach. She carried this lesson with her, in music and in life, and it shaped her approach to every interaction. Despite the whirlwind of new experiences, she never lost the intimacy of her first moments at the piano. She returned to small halls, to empty practice rooms, to the quiet spaces where she had first discovered her love for the instrument. There, she played with the same sincerity, the same attention to feeling and detail. These moments reminded her of the beauty of simplicity, of the joy found in pure expression, and of the way music could speak directly to the human heart without any need for pretense or spectacle. Her life had transformed in ways she could not have predicted, yet she remained remarkably grounded. Recognition, applause, and admiration were part of her journey, but they were not the goal. The goal was music itself, the exploration of emotion, the sharing of stories without words, and the quiet connection between performer and listener. Each performance, each note, each pause was a testament to that philosophy, and the audiences everywhere felt it, responding not to grandeur, but to honesty and depth. As she continued to perform, she often reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from humble beginnings, practicing in silence and solitude, to the moment when her quiet genius first revealed itself to an astonished audience. The path had been filled with patience, dedication, and love for the craft. She recognized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of practice, feeling, and authenticity that had allowed her to create moments that resonated deeply with others. Her story became more than just a personal journey. It became a symbol of possibility. People who heard her play understood that hidden talent could exist anywhere, nurtured quietly, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Her life was a testament to the power of dedication, humility, and love for one's craft. It reminded everyone that even the simplest beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes, if approached with sincerity and care. In quiet moments, she returned to the tunes that had first started her journey, playing them with a mixture of nostalgia and appreciation. These simple melodies reminded her of the joy of discovery, the thrill of unexpected connection, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing one's passion resonate with others. She understood that greatness was not about recognition alone, but about sharing something meaningful, touching lives, and leaving a trace of beauty in the world. She continued to play, traveling, performing, and teaching, always carrying with her the lessons of humility, patience, and authenticity. Her journey was ongoing, a living story of growth, discovery, and connection. And through it all, one thing remained constant: her love for the music, the quiet joy of expressing herself, and the understanding that the true reward lay not in applause, but in the hearts she touched and the lives she influenced with every note, every pause, and every carefully chosen chord.